calling off my wedding after finding out my fiancé never had the money he promised to contribute. I've been with my partner, Michael, for 5 years. I'm 33 and he's 32. We met in our late 20s and it felt like we clicked from the very beginning. We shared so many of the same values and dreams for the future. Over the years, we grew together in ways I never imagined, supporting each other through both the good and the bad. So, when Michael proposed to me in March of 2024, it felt like a natural next step for us. It was a simple proposal, but it was perfect in its own way. We were at a park, enjoying a sunny afternoon when Michael pulled me aside. I remember how nervous he looked as he got down on one knee, holding out a small, elegant ring. My heart stopped for a moment as he asked me the question that would change our lives forever. "Will you marry me?" I couldn't help but smile through the tears as I said, "Yes." I had always known that Michael was the one, and now it felt like everything was finally falling into place. We agreed to set our wedding date for December 2025. It was over a year and a half away, which gave us plenty of time to plan everything to perfection. We discussed the details, the venue, the dress, the guest list, and of course the costs. I knew weddings were expensive, but I also knew that we could manage if we were both willing to work together. Michael promised me that he would cover 70% of the wedding costs. I was relieved to hear that because I knew that managing a wedding budget could be stressful, especially with all the planning involved. He seemed confident about the arrangement, and I trusted him when he said he could handle his share. He told me that whenever I paid for something, he would transfer his part into my account. It seemed fair, and I didn't think twice about it. I was excited about the future. As an accountant, I could easily handle the budgeting and managing of our wedding finances. I had a lot of experience with numbers, and I felt comfortable taking the reins when it came to the planning. Michael was a successful lawyer, and he assured me that he had the means to contribute his share. He often bragged about his success in his career, the high-profile cases he worked on, and how financially stable he was. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? After all, he had always been so confident in his financial situation. The first few months after the proposal were filled with excitement. We dove into wedding planning, booking the venue, selecting vendors, and discussing the overall theme. I handled most of the work, but Michael promised to pitch in wherever he could. Every time I made a payment, I'd send him a quick message, and he'd assure me that the money would be transferred soon. He was always so confident and reassuring. By April 2025, I had already paid for a significant portion of the wedding. I had spent around $500,000 in local currency on the venue deposit, catering, flowers, and other expenses. I kept track of everything in a spreadsheet as I always do, and I expected Michael to send me his portion whenever I made a payment. But as the weeks passed, the transfers never came. I reminded him several times, always in a polite way, because I trusted him. I didn't want to be demanding or question his word. Every time he told me, "Yes, baby, after work. I'll send it soon." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that everything was going according to plan. But the payments were adding up, and I started to feel like something wasn't right. I tried not to let it bother me, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. At first, I convinced myself it was just a delay. Maybe he was waiting for a specific time or a paycheck. I knew that Michael had a busy schedule with his work, and I didn't want to add any extra stress to our relationship. But as the months went on, I started to wonder why nothing had come through yet. I wasn't expecting him to send everything at once, but a portion here and there would have helped ease the burden. Finally, in May 2025, after I had made several more payments, I realized I couldn't ignore the situation any longer. I needed to sit down and have an honest conversation with Michael. I couldn't continue to shoulder the financial load on my own, especially when he had promised me so much. I called him one evening and asked him to come over. I needed answers. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. When he arrived, I could tell something was off. He looked nervous, avoiding eye contact. Normally, Michael was calm and collected, but tonight he seemed different. "Michael," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk about the wedding. I've paid for so much already, and you haven't transferred anything. You promised me you'd cover 70% of the costs. What's going on?" He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I know, he said softly. "I've been meaning to send it to you, but there's something I need to tell you." I looked at him, my heart racing. My mind was already going 100 miles per hour, trying to piece everything together. "I don't have the savings I told you I did," Michael confessed, looking down at his hands. "I thought I could cover it with future income, or maybe even borrow the money from my parents. But I didn't want to disappoint you, so I kept telling you everything was fine. I'm sorry." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. He had lied to me. The man I had trusted, the man I had been planning my future with, didn't have the financial stability he had promised. I felt the weight of his confession crush me. I didn't know what to say. How could he have kept this from me for so long? Why didn't he just tell me the truth from the beginning? I tried to hold back my tears, but the hurt was too much. "How could you lie to me about this, Michael?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We've been together for 5 years. Why didn't you tell me the truth?" "I didn't want to let you down," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I thought I could make it work. I didn't want you to think less of me." The silence between us was deafening. All the trust I had placed in him, all the plans I had made for our future, suddenly felt like they were slipping away. Stared at Michael, the man I had planned to marry, the man I had shared my life with for the past 5 years, and for the first time, I didn't know who he was. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't even the fact that he hadn't kept his promise. It was the lie, the deep betrayal that cut through me like a sharp knife. He had been lying to me, pretending he was someone he wasn't. And for months I had been trusting him, relying on him, believing in his words. "I don't know what to say, Michael," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I've been carrying this burden alone, and you let me do that. Why didn't you just tell me from the start that you couldn't afford it? Why did you make me believe that everything was fine?" "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to disappoint you," he said, looking up at me with eyes filled with guilt and regret. "I thought I could make it work. I thought I could come up with the money before the wedding, but everything just piled up. And then I didn't know how to tell you." His words felt empty, like they were just excuses. They didn't change. The fact that he had lied to me for months, letting me handle the financial side of our wedding without any help. He had promised me that he would take care of his part, and I had believed him. I had trusted him with not just my heart, but with our future together. And now, it felt like everything we had built was crumbling before my eyes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Michael was a lawyer. He had always talked about how successful he was, how financially stable he was. He had always bragged about his big cases and the money he was making. I never once thought to question him. He had always presented himself as someone who had it all together. And now, here he was, admitting that he didn't have the money to contribute to the wedding he had promised to help plan and pay for. It wasn't just the money, though. It was the dishonesty. It was the way he had let me believe everything was fine while I carried the weight of the wedding planning on my own. It was the constant reassurance, the empty promises, the excuses, and the failure to come clean until it was too late. I had worked so hard to make this wedding perfect for both of us, and now it felt like I had been the only one invested in it. Michael had been focused on his own image, his career, his reputation, and all along, I had been the one left to pick up the pieces. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Michael," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "I don't think I can marry someone who can't even be honest with me. I've trusted you with everything, and this is how you repay me?" Michael's face fell, his eyes welling up with tears. "Please don't say that. I love you. I've always loved you. I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted this to happen." "I know you love me, Michael," I replied, feeling a knot form in my throat. "But love isn't enough. You can't keep lying to the person you love. You can't keep hiding things, hoping they'll just go away. You promised me you'd contribute. You promised me we'd be in this together. And you broke that promise." I stood up, pacing around the room, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't make sense of. How could he have let this happen? Why didn't he come to me earlier, before everything had gone so far? I felt betrayed by the very person I thought I could trust the most. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about the future, the life we had talked about building together. Could I really spend the rest of my life with someone who couldn't be honest with me, who couldn't keep his promises? "You don't understand," Michael said, his voice cracking as he stood up to face me. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was just trying to protect you. I thought if I kept pretending everything was fine, it would all work out. I thought I could find a way to make it happen, but I didn't. I failed you, and I'm so sorry." "I don't know if an apology is enough," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "This isn't just about money. This is about trust. This is about your word. And you broke it." I felt the weight of his words press down on me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he was sincere and that everything would work out. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore what had happened. Trust was the foundation of any relationship, and it had been shattered. Once that trust was gone, could we ever rebuild it? I didn't know the answer, but I didn't think I could continue down this path. I looked at him, my heart aching with the pain of it all. "I don't know if I can marry you anymore, Michael," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't think I can go through with it. I don't know if I can live with someone who hasn't been honest with me from the start." Michael's face turned pale, and he looked like he was on the verge of breaking down. "Please don't say that. I love you. I'll make this right, I promise." But the damage was done. The trust I had placed in him, the hopes I had for our future together, all of it felt like it had been shattered beyond repair. I didn't want to make any rash decisions, but in my heart, I knew I couldn't move forward with someone who had lied to me so easily. How could I marry him if I couldn't even trust him? The conversation ended with a painful silence. Neither of us knew what to say next. I had never imagined that this would be the end of our relationship, but now I couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. Michael wasn't the man I thought he was, and I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive him for what he had done. I told Michael I needed some space. I needed to think things through. I didn't want to make any hasty decisions, but at the same time, I knew that I couldn't continue living in a relationship where trust had been broken so deeply. The next few days were a blur. My mind was in turmoil, torn between the love I still had for Michael and the hurt that lingered from his betrayal. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. Something had changed, and I wasn't sure if we could ever get it back. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and emotional turmoil. I found myself caught between the love I still felt for Michael and the overwhelming sense of betrayal that hung in the air. I wanted to believe his apologies. I wanted to believe that he could change. that somehow we could get back to the way things were before this whole mess began. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Trust had been broken, and no amount of words could fix that. I spent a lot of time thinking about the relationship, about the promises we made to each other, and about the future we had planned together. My mind kept returning to one question: how could I marry someone who couldn't be honest with me? How could I spend my life with a man who let me bear the weight of our wedding finances alone, pretending everything was fine when it was clearly falling apart? Michael called me every day, apologizing over and over again, asking for another chance. He told me he was willing to do anything to make things right. But no matter how sincere his voice sounded, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all too late. He had let me down in the worst possible way, and I wasn't sure I could get past that. It wasn't just the financial aspect of things. It was the lie. The fact that he had built an entire image around his supposed financial stability. He had told me he could afford his share of the wedding, that he was financially secure. I had trusted him, and in return, he had deceived me. That lie had far more weight than the money itself. It was a betrayal of trust, and trust was the foundation of everything in a relationship. To make matters worse, my parents kept pushing me to go through with the wedding. I could feel the pressure mounting from every side. They told me I was being too hard on Michael, that every relationship had its ups and downs, and that I shouldn't throw away 5 years just because of one mistake. "You've already announced the engagement to everyone," my mom said one evening. "What will people think if you call it off now?" I understood where they were coming from. I could feel the weight of their disappointment, the silent judgment that was building. It was as if they thought I was overreacting, that I should just forgive Michael and move on. After all, I had spent so much time planning this wedding, and now everything was at risk of falling apart. The thought of explaining to everyone why I called off the wedding filled me with dread. It was embarrassing. It felt like a failure, but I couldn't ignore my own feelings. I couldn't pretend like everything was okay just to save face. Yes, I had planned the wedding, and yes, the announcement had been made to both our families, but none of that mattered if I wasn't being true to myself. If I wasn't being true to my own heart, to my own sense of what was right and wrong, then what was the point? I spent a lot of time wrestling with my thoughts. On one hand, I wanted to make the relationship work. I wanted to believe that Michael was genuinely sorry, that we could move past this and rebuild what we had. On the other hand, I couldn't ignore the fact that things had changed between us. The trust I had placed in him had been shattered, and no matter how much he apologized, I didn't know if I could ever fully trust him again. I decided to take some time apart from Michael. I needed space to think, to clear my mind, and to figure out what I wanted. I couldn't make this decision under pressure, not with my parents pushing me one way, and my own heart pulling me in another. I needed to be honest with myself, even if that meant making a difficult decision. During this time apart, I spoke to my friends, confided in my closest confidants, and reflected on everything that had led up to this point. They all had different perspectives, but one thing became clear. No one could tell me what was best for me. The decision had to come from within me. I couldn't let anyone else dictate my path. As I spoke to my friends, I realized something. The love I had for Michael hadn't disappeared, but the respect and trust I once had for him had been severely damaged. Love was important, yes, but respect and trust were even more so. Without those, a relationship couldn't survive. And if I was being honest with myself, I wasn't sure if I could ever fully trust Michael again. One afternoon, I took a long walk to clear my head. As I walked, I thought about the future. I thought about what I wanted from life, from a partner, and from a marriage. I realized that what I truly wanted was honesty, transparency, and trust. Those were the things that mattered most to me. And right now, I wasn't getting that from Michael. When I returned home, I felt more certain of my decision. I didn't want to go through with a wedding where I wasn't sure of the foundation of our relationship. I didn't want to marry someone who had lied to me, even if it was to protect me. I didn't want to live a life built on secrets and unspoken truths. The next day, I called Michael and asked him to meet me. I could feel the weight of what I was about to say pressing down on me. It wasn't easy, and my heart was heavy as I waited for him to arrive. When Michael came into my apartment, I could see the hope in his eyes. He had been waiting for me to forgive him, to let him make it right. But as he stood there in front of me, I knew that I had made up my mind. "Michael, I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice breaking as the tears started to well up in my eyes. "I can't marry you." He looked at me in shock, as though he couldn't understand what I was saying. "What do you mean? We can work through this. We can fix everything." "I don't think I can ever trust you again," I said, struggling to find the words. "The way you lied to me, the way you made me carry all of this on my own. I can't move past that. I can't marry you if I don't trust you." Michael's face crumpled as the reality of what I was saying hit him. "Please," he whispered. "I love you. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." But it was too late. The trust had been broken, and I couldn't go back to the way things were. I didn't want to live my life questioning everything, wondering if he was being honest with me. I needed more than that. "I'm sorry, Michael," I said, feeling my heart shatter as I spoke the words. "I can't marry you." After I told Michael that I couldn't go through with the wedding, the silence between us was unbearable. I could see the pain in his eyes, but I knew deep down that this was the right decision. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about my future, about my happiness, and about the respect and trust I deserved in a relationship. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of clarity. As heartbreaking as it was, I was doing the right thing. Michael left my apartment that day, and I didn't hear from him for a while. I wasn't sure what he was going through, but I knew that I needed time to heal and to move forward. I spent the next few weeks reflecting on everything that had happened, trying to process the emotions and the aftermath of my decision. The hardest part was dealing with the fallout from our families and friends. My parents were disappointed, and I could feel the tension in their voices when they spoke to me. They didn't understand why I had called off the wedding. They didn't see what I saw, the dishonesty, the broken promises, and the betrayal. All they could focus on was the fact that we had been engaged for over a year, and now everything was unraveling. "Are you sure about this?" my mom asked, her voice filled with concern. "You've been together for so long, and this is just a small bump in the road. You can work through this, right?" I tried to explain to her that it wasn't just a small bump. It wasn't just about the money or the wedding. It was about trust. And I couldn't ignore the fact that Michael had lied to me about something so important. But she didn't understand. She wanted me to stay with him, to go through with the wedding, to make everything look perfect for everyone else. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't live a life built on lies just to please others. My friends, on the other hand, were more supportive. They told me I had made the right choice, that I deserved someone who would be honest with me, who would build a future with me based on trust and mutual respect. They reminded me that it wasn't a failure, that it was okay to walk away when something wasn't right. And slowly, I started to believe them. As the months passed, I focused on healing. I took time for myself, something I hadn't done in years. I went on long walks, spent time with my family and friends, and immersed myself in my work. I realized that while I had been so focused on building a life with Michael, I had neglected my own needs and desires. I needed to reconnect with myself, to rediscover who I was without the influence of anyone else. The pain of the breakup didn't disappear overnight, but with time, I began to feel a sense of peace. I learned to appreciate my independence again, to value the things that made me happy without needing anyone else to validate it. I rediscovered my love for traveling, for reading, for exploring new hobbies. I focused on building my career and strengthening my friendships. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece. There were still moments when I thought about Michael, when I wondered if I had made the right decision. I missed the person I thought he was. The man I had loved and shared so many memories with. But every time I thought about going back, I reminded myself of the reasons I had ended things. I remembered the lies, the broken promises, and the hurt that had followed. And I knew that staying with someone who couldn't be honest with me was never the right choice. In the end, I realized that calling off the wedding wasn't a failure. It was an act of self-love and self-respect. It was me choosing my happiness and my future over the idea of perfection that others might expect. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the best decision I could have made for myself. I had learned that no amount of love could make up for a lack of trust, and I wasn't willing to settle for anything less than the respect and honesty I deserved. As I moved forward, I found a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't bound by the expectations of others or by a relationship that no longer served me. I was free to create my own path, to pursue my own dreams, and to find happiness on my own terms. And in time, I knew that I would find someone who valued me the way I valued myself. Someone who would be honest, trustworthy, and loving in every way. For now, I was content. I had learned a valuable lesson that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead to the greatest growth. And while my relationship with Michael had ended, it was only the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one that I was ready to embrace with open arms.